Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. New figures show New Zealand women are significantly underrepresented in property ownership. More than half of Gen Z men and 2/3 of Millennial men own the home they live in. That's compared to the female figures of about 1/3 and under half, respectively. Today on the Front Page, Cotality NZ's chief property economist, Kelvin Davidson, is with us to discuss what's contributing to this discrepancy and how we might be able to fix it. So, Kelvin, the report shows a significant ownership gap between men and women, especially among younger generations. What are the most striking factors contributing to this, do you think?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to two things, and the first thing is going to be income. We know there's a gender wage gap, unfortunately, across New Zealand. It has closed. If you go back sort of 3-5 years, something like that, it was about a 9% wage gap. So females getting paid about 9% less for a very similar job. That gap has closed to 5%. So that's good, but obviously more needs to be done. Our survey shows that a smaller proportion of females earn, say, more than 100,000. There's some kind of benchmark. Whichever wage you look at, there are lower proportions of females earning that wage. So I think it's reflecting financial resources. It's that wage gap. It's lower salaries for similar work, and just generally overall income is a bit lower. So that's going to be a restraint in terms of property ownership. It's going to be harder to afford a property. But the survey is also telling us there's perhaps some, I don't think it's education gaps necessarily, but just a sort of information gap in the sense of understanding the home buying process. There's about 16% of female respondents, of those females who haven't owned a property or don't own a property now, about 16% said they just didn't know where to start. And there was about 6% for males. So, those figures aren't massive, but it's a reasonable gap between male and female, I guess, sort of understanding of the home buying process. So yeah, if we can fix the income gap, if we can, I guess, better target educational processes around home buying, that will all help to make a difference. And hopefully we can make progress over the medium term.
In terms of how this survey is conducted, I know one thing that people may point out is like, well, in a couple, the house might be under a man's name. Is that taken into account when getting these results?
Yeah, I mean, that will be an issue for some respondents, but I guess we're simply asking people, do they own property? Do they not? Why don't they? If they don't, these sorts of things. I suspect that, okay, technically in some cases it might be the man's name on the title. There'll be cases where I guess it's only the woman's name on the title as well, so it could go both ways. But I suspect in most cases, even if it is only the man's name on the title, in a male-female partnership, obviously a very different type, multiple different types there. But in a male-female partnership, even if it is the man's name on the title, I suspect the female respondent would probably still say, "Yep, I own the property," even if technically, if you went right into the records and looked at the title, it might tell you something different. So I suspect that's probably not a big deal. It may be an issue in some cases, but I don't think it would be a game changer for the overall results.
In terms of perhaps support, what would that look like, and whose responsibility do you think it falls on?
Well, I mean, everyone really. There's this. I suppose it's easy in this issue, in these sorts of issues, to point fingers at men point fingers at women. I mean, in the end, it's on everyone to improve these issues, whether that's a female already on an executive or a male already on an executive. It's really down to everyone, I think. And I think there's obviously a greater awareness of the issues here, and it's not just in relation to property, but just in relation to the workplace in general. There's issues here to be fixed. So I think it's on everyone really, and anything the government can do to improve those sorts of rules as well would be a good thing. And so again, one of those things, progress made, but more to do.
In terms of getting onto the property ladder, I mean, the barriers are getting higher and higher, right? No matter what gender you are or how you identify. I mean, it used to be like, well, rent it costs the same amount as a mortgage, so why don't we just invest in a house and get a property or something? But it's really not the case these days, hey?
Yeah, I mean, so definitely not saying buying a property is easy by any means. It's still expensive. There's still a lot of challenges there. What we have seen, though, if you look at housing affordability measures, certainly over the past 3 or 4 years, is that it has got easier. Not saying it's easy, but it has got easier. I mean, house prices are down nationally 18% from the peak. Interest rates have fallen a lot in the past couple of years. And of course, in the meantime, incomes have gone up. So if you look at a fairly standard measure of affordability, such as new mortgage payments as a share of household income, that's now pretty much back down to its average. So it started from a very stretched level, so all it's done is really return to average. But that's still a big improvement on where it was. And if you use average as a measure of normality, well, you could probably say it's relatively normal. Now, it hasn't gone below average. It's not screamingly cheap, but things are a lot easier than they have been. And there's finance available for people if they can satisfy certain serviceability criteria. There is finance available at the banks. That's not an issue. So there are reasonable conditions out there for buyers at the moment. Again, not saying it's easy. Regardless of female or male, it's still a challenge to buy that first property. But I think it always has been. And you can look at different challenges through time. Maybe perhaps house prices were a lot lower in 1980, but also interest rates were a heck of a lot higher and sometimes in the past. So there's always swings and roundabouts. I think it's never easy, but at least we have seen some improvement in housing affordability. And I think there's every reason to think that stays around for a while, because you look at things like land supply at the moment. The government's pushing really hard on regulatory change for more houses, and we have seen good progress on that actually in the last couple of years. The stock of physical housing has risen relative to population. So I think there's reasonable cause for optimism there. It has to stick through the political cycle, of course. Who knows what's going to happen later in the year? But this government's pushing very hard on land supply, hopefully getting that up. That will have a favourable impact on affordability too. So I'm fairly optimistic on that one.
What I'm getting from that is that I need to stop ordering takeout because it really is doable and possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to dip into the sort of triple CFA lending rules that were around a while ago, where banks were scrutinising sort of Netflix and what was it, avocado on toast and things like that.
Oh, they were too, yeah.
Yeah, but now those rules have relaxed now, and that was a good thing because they were overly stringent. But I mean, each to their own. There's no financial advice here or anything, and people make their own decisions. But what we are seeing in the market at the moment is that first-time buyers are very active, running at record numbers, in fact, in terms of market share. Now, in a busier market as well, that's more deals too. So first-time buyers are really active. I mean, lower interest rates help, lower house prices help, I should say, as well as tapping into KiwiSaver. That's a support. There is always that, I guess, non-monetary incentive of security of tenure. Getting into an owner-occupied property. Now, I'm not against renting by any means. I think it's a great option. You look at a lot of countries around the world. Most people actually rent, and they're not poor countries. They're not on a path to oblivion or anything. You're talking here countries like Germany, like Switzerland. Most people rent there, and they do pretty well. So renting's not a bad thing.
Since I'm a woman, I'm buying this house alone. It's not an investment that me and my longtime boyfriend are going into together. People just continue to assume and say that we bought it together. At the end of the day, it's not this huge issue, but I thought it was something that is interesting to look at, analyze, and talk about, because I believe that more and more women should be doing what I'm doing, which is making their own investments apart from their family, apart from their mothers, their fathers, their boyfriends, their husbands, because at the end of the day, we don't live in a world that really puts us first. So we have to put ourselves first sometimes.
We are very transfixed on home ownership in this country, and it's something that we've talked about on this podcast time and time again. Do you think that will ever shift, or is that just the way it is here?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it does seem pretty ingrained. I mean, and we have seen over time that as affordability has got more challenging, that home ownership rate has come down. But I think there's a distinction to be made here between, I guess, what people would like to happen and what can happen. Choice first necessity thing. And even though the home ownership rate has come down, in some cases that won't be a choice. It's just simply because housing's got less affordable over time. And so I suspect if you said to people, that you surveyed, do you want to own a house at some point? I suspect that would stay pretty strong. I think it is pretty ingrained. Maybe what we are seeing at the moment is a bit of a shift away from wanting to own investment property. I think there's still a strong desire for people to get into their own house, get that security of tenure. I can't see that really disappearing anytime soon, but what we are detecting at the moment is maybe a bit of a shift in terms of owning rental property. People going, that's not as easy a business as it once might have been. If capital growth has slowed down in future, it's harder to get the same return. More investment options on the table in terms of simple ways of investing in shares, these sorts of things. So we might be seeing a shift there. Now, we're only going to know in due course when we can look back in hindsight, but just at the moment there does seem to be a wee bit of a mentality shift going on there. So that could be something that I could definitely subscribe to. But does the desire to own your own house to live in change much? Yeah, not so sure.
Well, this is something actually quite interesting I found. The report also found that 2 in 3 property owners have made some kind of sustainability upgrade. Talk me through that.
Yeah, so we looked here at, so this is for people obviously who have already bought a property. Are they thinking about things like solar panels, insulation, these sorts of things? We split it into sort of major categories. You'd put solar panels in there, as opposed to sort of more minor categories like, I guess, putting seals around your doors, this sort of thing. So there's a scale question here, but yeah, certainly a high proportion of current homeowners have either taken steps to improve the so-called sustainability of their property or intend to. Quite a strong proportion as well looking to make changes within the next sort of year or two. So that's a good thing. It's actually the intent to do that is stronger at the younger generations. So when you get into the sort of Gen Zs and Millennials, that intent or desire to improve the sustainability is actually stronger. Now, there might be a cost factor there, a financial hurdle, but at least the intent is there. So, yeah, it has to be a good thing. We know there's certainly in some of our older properties around the country, there's going to be issues with quality. You see all the surveys around, mold and asthma issues and all these sorts of things. So, improving the quality of our housing stock is a pretty big deal as well. So that's encouraging, and that's something we can probably look at more in sort of future surveys too.
Well, it would make sense, right? Because these are probably the generations that have lived in a damp, mouldy house and paid $500 for a room for the privilege of doing it. So when they've got their own space, they would probably want to alleviate that and never live in that kind of situation again, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's presumably going to be part of the motivation for moving into owner occupation. It's potentially being able to get into a house you can renovate if you like, paint it whatever colour you want to, these sorts of things. I suppose one thing to point out about the rental market at the moment is that, there are going to be quality issues still, but we've got the Healthier Homes standards, so at least that's going to have improved on average the quality of rental properties around things like making sure you've got a heat pump, there's ventilation, these sorts of things. So there have been positive steps on that front. And at the moment, probably the rental market is tilted in favour of tenants, really. There's the rents are either flat to falling in a lot of the parts of the country, and there's decent levels of choice. So, I suppose I'd just say if people are kind of not so comfortable in the current situation, there may well be some more choice out there. And, shopping around right now as a tenant's probably not the worst idea. And also, in the owner occupation market, it's a buyer's market too. There's a lot of listings out there. So at the moment, things are probably in favour of tenants and in favour of buyers, a little bit against landlords and property owners. So there's this kind of window there, I guess, where you don't always see it like this, but just at the moment we're in a sort of favourable market for those groups.
And some people might be listening to this and thinking, why does it matter so much that women own less homes than men? Why are we talking about it? Why is it such a big deal? But I guess what I want to know is, what are the long-term economic risks if younger women say, Gen Z millennials, continue to lag behind in the home ownership space?
Yeah, well, it's really to do with, earlier access to property or any assets in general, really. Earlier investment, earlier timing of starting to build wealth is going to be beneficial in the long term. I mean, it's not just in the sort of straightforward sense of the sooner you start building assets, the more you'll have later, but also sort of compounds, and you can open up more opportunities for yourself as you start to build that asset base. So yeah, I think it's around that, not necessarily property. I mean, as I say, people are buying all sorts of different things. We're a property data company, so we look at it from a property angle, but it can be any sort of asset really. And so it's about, I think, building that asset base sooner, creating more opportunities later in life, those sort of positive things, as well as there are non-monetary benefits too, as we've talked about, of having a security of tenure, perhaps having a property that's of slightly higher quality. You can put on the solar panels if you want. So it's around that, and we know that for whatever reason, the legacy things, the ingrained mentality of buying property, it has been a strong source of wealth and income in retirement. So that may shift over time potentially, but for right now, it's still a pretty strong source. So if the earlier people can tap into that, the better. And that applies regardless of male or female. But as the survey shows, females are lagging behind on that ownership stat right now. So improving that will have all sorts of benefits for all of us.
Thanks for joining us, Kelvin.
No worries. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is hosted and produced by me, Chelsea Daniels. Kane Dickey is our studio operator, Richard Martin, our producer and editor, and our executive producer is Jane Yee. Follow The Front Page on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for another look beyond the headlines.